Hey Algebra 2, today we're going to write equations given our solutions. But before we do that, I think it's easiest if we do one problem and we are going to factor and solve. So we have to factor this trinomial. First thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to make an ACB chart. So remember that A is 1, B is 6, and C is 27. So when I take A times C, I need factors of negative 27 that add up to 6. So my factors that I can use are 1 and 27 and 3 and 9. All right, so 3 and 9 are 6 units away, and it has to add up to positive 6, so therefore the 3 has to be my negative number. So this factors as x minus 3 and x plus 9 equals 0. So this top line, this is your quadratic equation. So we are actually starting with the quadratic equation. These are your two factors. So in this step, we're going to call it factors that multiply and equal 0. The next step would be to break your factors apart. And one factor is x minus 3 equals 0, and one is x plus 9 equals 0. We're going to call this each factor equal to 0. And then we move the constant to the other side. So x equals 3, and subtract the 9 over in that case, and x equals negative 9. And these are our solutions. So that is how we factor and solve. Today what we are doing is we are taking it and we are working our way backwards, because we are given the solutions and we have to end up at this first step and write the equation. So we have to go in reverse. So this is reverse of factoring. So here we start with the solutions. All right, so the prior step is set each factor equal to 0. All right, so step 2 is move the number with the x term and make your equation equal to 0. So I'm going to subtract the 3 over, and I'm going to subtract the 5 over. So now I have x minus 3 equals 0, and x minus 5 equals 0. In the prior step, I take them and I show my two factors being multiplied. All right, so I'm going to take these two factors and I'm going to write them in this format. X minus 3 times x minus 5 equals 0. So we'll call this factors multiply and equal 0. In step number 4, so to get it from this form back to this form, you're going to have to multiply, distribute, FOIL, whatever it is you all like to call it. All right, so I'm taking x times x, which is x squared. Just go up here a little bit more. X times negative 5, which is negative 5x. Now distribute your negative 3. Negative 3 times x is negative 3x. And negative 3 times negative 5 is plus 15 equals 0. I'm going to have to combine like terms with those x's. That gets me an x squared minus 8x plus 15 equals 0. And step number 5, you're going to replace the 0 with f of x to write it in function form. So we're going to get rid of 0, and we're going to put an f of x in its place. I generally like my f of x on the left, so f of x equals x squared minus 8x plus 15. So that is how, given your solutions, you work backwards and you write your equation. Let's do a couple more. All right, so x equals 0 and x equals -7. All right, so I want to move it over so that x equals 0. So x already equals 0 here, so there's nothing really to do. I'm going to add the 7 over to the other side, and the second one is x plus 7 equals 0. All right, so my next step, you put your two factors together and you write them with parentheses. So I have x times x plus 7 equals 0. Your next step is to distribute to get rid of your parentheses. X times x is x squared, and x times 7 is 7x. And then your next move is to get rid of your 0 and replace that with an f of x and write it in function notation. In problem number 3, we have a fraction to deal with. Okay, so I have x equals 1/3, and I have x equals -4. First move is to add and subtract the number to the other side. So I'm going to have to subtract my 1/3 over, and this is x minus 1/3 equals 0. Have to add the 4 to move it to the other side, and that gets me an x plus 4 equals 0. Our next move was to put them together and write them with parentheses. So this would be x minus 1/3 and x plus 4 equals 0. So back when we did the divide and slide, we don't have fractions here. So we're going to take that 3 and it's going to slide up in front of the x. So we're going to rewrite that factor as 3x minus 1, and then we still have x plus 4 equals 0. We're going to have to multiply and distribute to get rid of our parentheses. So 3x times x is 3x squared. 3x times 4 is 12x. Distribute your 1. -1 times x is -1x. -1 times 4 is -4. I'm going to combine like terms here. That adds up to 11x. And your last move, we are going to replace that 0 and instead write it with f of x. So this is in function notation now. So that is what you do when you have an answer that is a fraction. The back side is just more practice. We have fractions. We have the same term. I'll do one more, number 6. All right, so we have radical answers. So x equals radical 2, and x equals negative radical 2. Even if your answers are radicals, your steps are still the same. I'm going to subtract the radical 2 to the other side. That first one becomes x minus radical 2 equals 0. And I'm going to add the radical 2 to the other side, and this becomes x plus radical 2 equals 0. You're going to put these two together and write them with parentheses. So I have x minus radical 2 and x plus radical 2. Your next move is to multiply and distribute and clear parentheses. X times x is x squared. X times radical 2 is plus x radical 2. Distribute your negative radical 2, so I have, that's a minus x radical 2. And I have a negative times a positive, so that's going to be a negative. Radical 2 times radical 2. So when you multiply radicals, you multiply them, and you just keep the answer under the radical. These two are like terms. I have a positive and a negative, so they zero each other out. So I have x squared minus radical 4 equals 0. And then finally, I'm going to fix that, and I'm going to take the square root of 4, and I get x squared minus 2, and I'm going to switch out the 0 with an f of x. And that is how you write them when you have radical answers. Thank you so much.